Today on the Gaming Manual. Ho ho holy crap, it's Tips and Tricks December 1998. What's this about a new Zelda game for the N64? WCW NWO Revenge? And the glove? Wait, what? So strap yourself in, grab some eggnog, your favorite failed peripherals, and prepare for some serious game coverage, brother! Hey, this is Jason.
And I'm Josh. Welcome to the Gaming Manual. On today's episode, we're taking a look at the December 1998 issue of Tips and Tricks magazine. This edition features a great picture of a young Link, firing away with the slingshot. The hype for Ocarina of Time was insane during this period, and this edition truly is a glimpse into the intensity of that era. You gotta love that Superman 64 ad right here at the start. That one sure turned out to be a hit, huh? Can you imagine what it must have been like to get that on Christmas Day? And what did you get for Christmas? Disappointment. Now you know how I feel when I tell people you're my son. You know what? Probably shouldn't think about it.
Letters to the editor. We know how these work.
Now, there's a neat little blurb down here where the reader asks about the value of some NES games. We have to keep in mind, this is 1998.
A reader asked, in regards to salvage value, how much money is this stuff worth if I trade it in? A Nintendo Entertainment System, Double Dragon 3, Batman Returns, DuckTales, WWF WrestleMania Challenge, Urban Champion, Super Mario Bros. Duck Hunt, and Tecmo Bowl. Oh, and without the covers. To which an editor replies, not a lot. We checked the buyback prices at Game Dude, Jason's favorite used video game store, and figured you'd get about $21.60 for the whole shebang. You're better off keeping it in the closet so you can show your grandchildren how cool Super Mario Bros. Was in 2D. The main reason why your collection is not particularly valuable is because, with the possible exception of Batman Returns, all of your games are extremely common. If you really wanted to make more than chump change by selling used NES carts, you'd have to get some pretty obscure games, like the following: Dragon Warrior 2, Dragon Warrior 3, and Dragon Warrior 4. Everybody had a copy of the original Dragon Warrior. Heck, at one point, Nintendo was giving the game away for free if you subscribed to Nintendo Power. But the second, third, and fourth games were released in such limited quantities that most people don't even know they exist. Most used video game dealers will give you a pretty good price for any of the games in the Pac-Man or Donkey Kong series. These carts are always in demand. Probably the most collectible of any of the mass-produced NES games is the version of Tetris which was re-released by Tengen. A lawsuit caused this cartridge to be pulled from retail shelves after Nintendo acquired the rights to produce its own version of Tetris. Having said that, there are certain NES carts which are not generally recognized as valuable by used video game dealers, but are sought after by collectors and stand a pretty good chance of increasing in value as time goes by. Namely, any of the unlicensed third-party games released by companies like American Video Entertainment or Color Dreams. These cartridges were not given Nintendo's seal of approval, and therefore were not as easy to find as most licensed titles. Pay special attention to Chimerica Codemasters games like Micro Machines, The Fantastic Adventures of Dizzy, B-52, and the Quattro 4-in-1 carts. Unlike the great majority of unlicensed NES software, the Codemasters games were almost always very high-quality titles with great graphics, sound, and gameplay. If you have any of these unusual games in your collection, you should probably hang on to them for a few years and see what happens.
I don't have those games.
Do you remember mail-order gaming stuff? Now, I've personally never ordered anything through these, but the idea of it sure was cool. This was a little bit over my head for the age I was at the time. I always felt like this was something one of your buddy's older brothers would get a hold of and you may catch a rare glimpse of at some point. Pretty rad. They don't waste any time getting right into the Zelda content here. This is actually a really good starter guide for Ocarina of Time. It gets you going without giving too much of the game away. I can't emphasize this point enough. This game was on fire when it was released. I vividly remember saving my birthday money and going to Toys R Us to pick this game up. I just turned 11, so that would mean January 1999, which would mean the game was less than 2 months old. Fire.
Oh wow! It's the glove! Do you remember this thing? Well, neither do we. Ever hear of the Power Glove? The glove was just the Power Glove, but for the PlayStation and N64. However, you didn't have to punch codes into it. All jokes aside, this was one controller add-on that I didn't want. While it was an interesting concept, it always had me asking, would you use it? And more importantly, how much did it weigh? I cannot imagine trying to play for more than half an hour with this bulky thing strapped to my hand. Look at it, for 2 seconds. The buttons are under your fingers, so you'd have to remember where the buttons are, and I may have never owned a 64, but I know that the C buttons were often used for camera controls, so spreading them amongst 3 different fingers doesn't sound like a wise decision to me. Maybe I'm wrong, but if I ever come across one, I would be willing to try it out and maybe do a review of it. That is, of course, assuming it doesn't sprain my wrist.
WCW NWO Revenge ad. We're getting close.
Bushido Blade. This is another game where you really had to know all the moves to play it competitively. This might be one of the reasons it wasn't as popular or as long-lasting as Mortal Kombat, Street Fighter, and eventually Soul Calibur. This is another one where the manual didn't list all the moves, so you were really on your own without a proper guide. Armored Core. This was a great game. Thankfully, this issue contains a full walkthrough along with a list of all the parts. For this game, this is a big deal, because if you have insight on what parts are coming up, you can better plan for your in-game budget. I actually recall playing this game, and I'm getting really annoyed with having to save up to get a good part, only to have a better part unlock after the next mission that was better suited for my playstyle. These lists were a godsend, and let me build a mech that I wanted without having to waste money or grind missions.
Back issues. I still think this is really cool to see. There was a period of time where if you didn't own the physical copies of these issues, they were more or less lost forever. But now, we have awesome resources like RetroMagazines.com that let us browse and even buy these classics. Other websites, such as Archive.com, offer a treasure trove of PDF versions of these very same magazines. This is one aspect of the internet that we're very thankful for here at the Gaming Manual. Vigilante 8. This was the N64's answer to Twisted Metal, and it was just as awesome in my opinion. I played the heck out of this game at a buddy's house. One of my favorite features? No loading times. Also, the cast of characters is actually pretty good, and nothing feels too overdone or distracting. I actually suggest checking this one out if you haven't.
Climax Lander. Wait. I remember this being called Time Stalkers.
And over on the next page we have codes. Sweet Lady Luck, are there tons of codes here? This is the meat and potatoes of tips and tricks, and exactly why nerdy kids like myself would bring a pen and some paper into the grocery store.
You've got your N64 codes, your PlayStation
Cash for games.
Okay, you've got your Sega Saturn codes, your Game Boy codes, and even some arcade tips in the back. You most certainly got your $5 worth with this bad boy.
Just for fun, $4.99 in 1998 is now $9.11 in 2023 when accounted for inflation, which just so happens to be 82.6%. Whoa. Moving on, we have GameShark codes, for those of us lucky enough to own such a peripheral. These were a big deal back in the day if we're being honest. I remember borrowing and using a buddy's N64 GameShark quite a bit for games like Doom 64 and Duke Nukem 64. Ah, the memories.
Here's something you don't see often. Printed high scores. This is definitely old school.
FuncoLand! This was my favorite gaming store ever, even to this day. Floor-to-ceiling shelves of NES, SNES, Genesis, PlayStation, N64, you name it. I remember being so fanatical at like age 10 or so that the guy just let me behind the counter because it was way easier to just let me scan the NES stuff than it was to answer my 1 million questions. What a nerd! WCW NWO Revenge. This is one of my favorite wrestling games, only beaten out by WWF No Mercy, which is based on the exact same engine. What a blast from the past. I actually asked Josh if I could borrow his N64 with this very game over Christmas break. Even though the graphics haven't aged very well, the gameplay absolutely has in my personal opinion. This is how wrestling games should be. Weak and strong grapple, weak and strong attack. You can perform submissions and special moves, and even steal your opponent's special moves by holding A and B when your special meter is full. Give me this one and No Mercy all day. Closing Zelda Ad.
The Cool Zone. Well, that wraps up today's episode. Give us a like if you can, and don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already.
And make sure to click the bell icon.
As always, thanks for taking the time to check out the gaming manual, and we'll see you in the next video.